Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar Legends role-playing game, Lore Discussion. This one is going to be all about the Wan Shi Tong's Adventure Guide. So this is the sort of add-on book. It's a whole separate book compared to the Legend RPG core book, but it is an add-on book. So it does not have the amount of content, the number of pages that the core book has, in that, you know, it's basically made up of a chapter on Wan Shi Tong's library. That's the Wan Shi Tong aspect of it. You get the other legend NPC characters, and then there are basically 5 adventure books, 5 properly laid out adventures like the Vanishing Act one and the Forbidden Scroll one that is discussed in previous videos. So there's one for each era, and they're more set stories. So the majority of the, I suppose, information that we're going to be going over in this book from a lore discussion will actually end up being from those adventure books, not the Wan Shi Tong section or the legend NPCs. So that is important to get into. So it's a weird one because I find the information from the adventure guides to be kind of weird as to what way do we deal with that information, because it's the premise for a story that ultimately you are meant to play out by playing this game, but there's no canonical ending to those stories, in that you are meant to make up the nature of how the story happens by yourself. So it's very weird in that you're meant to interpret all the setup as being canon, but then you can't ever know how the event actually plays out. So even if it kind of feels interesting and kind of important, we'll never know the answer to it, because are they ever going to tell a story that just answers one of the questions from the RPG stuff? It's kind of really weird, and that just, will it be information that's ever addressed anywhere? So let's go through this. We'll start with chapter 1 here, the library. Now, Wan Shi Tong does give a little bit of narration ahead of each chapter. It's reasonably well written in character for Wan Shi Tong, but there's not a lot of information. That was the one thing we were sort of promised with the Wan Shi Tong Adventure Guide, is that there would be new information, new canon information on Wan Shi Tong. And while there is, it is relatively small and subtle in the grand scheme of things. It is not a blowout on the library like the Roku era was, so that's something you have to kind of keep in mind as well. I'll just read out this sort of intro here. I'm Wan Shi Tong, he who knows 10,000 things. You may address me as Great Wan Shi Tong. Mine is the greatest library in all of existence, and any mind with the slightest education knows it. In my grand beneficence, I allowed visitors to peruse my archive as long as they brought something of value to add to the library. Of course, visitors abused my generosity time after time. They came with greed or a hunger for power in their hearts. They had no respect for the thing I love, true knowledge for its own sake. It wounded me each time they plucked truths and wonders from my library just for their own material gain. I've had to close it, move it around, bury it deep in the desert, anything to protect it. But you're not here to merely gain some advantage over an enemy, are you? You're here to learn from my library because you love to learn, of course. Because I'd hate to have to show you what I think of those with less pure motivations. Ah, you are a true sojourners on a quest for learning, I see. Well then, peruse this tome at your leisure. Inside you will find more about my library itself, knowledge about the greatest repository of knowledge in existence. Then you can read for yourself tales and stories of great heroism and adventure across the lifespans of the past 4 avatars, and so on. This ends up sort of being what this whole chapter on the library is, repeated over and over and over again. You can tell they only had the most minimal of new information to add to this, in that the whole Wan Shi Tong dynamic is people have used the knowledge of my library. People have used the knowledge of my library. That's it. We don't learn anything, I think, super substantial as we go through this, which is kind of unfortunate. So we then get into the chapter itself, and effectively we get what was just explained in that intro bit, just in the kind of core text itself here. Just covering the idea of like Wan Shi Tong's relationship with humanity defines the role of the library. In past eras, Wan Shi Tong still believed in part that humanity could prove itself worthy, But as his mistrust in humanity and his motives grew, so did the seclusion of the library. What is the library? The Spirit Library is the domain of Wan Shi Tong, a powerful and ancient owl spirit. The exact founding of the Spirit Library isn't known to the world, but it is as astonishingly ancient as Wan Shi Tong himself. Until a few thousand years before the Korra era, Wan Shi Tong kept the library in the spirit world, where he collected knowledge. His servants, the knowledge seekers, are capable and cunning. These fox spirits have blue eyes and a keen sense of where to pursue new knowledge. They regularly pass from the spirit world to the physical world to collect books and tomes and bring them back to the library. And then after this, they just kind of covered the idea that, he put it in the Siwang Desert. And again, they then get into the whole idea that he did it because it was easier to get knowledge from the human world, and so on. And then it gets into the idea of the abuse of knowledge, just mentioned again. It's really stretched out what we basically already know about the library. The next section actually is where the new information is. So it's the library's location. So it basically just covers the idea that, it's in the Siwang Desert, but let's cover where it is in each era. So throughout the Kyoshi, Roku, and 100-Year War eras, the Spirit Library occupied the same physical location in the Siwang Desert, but the desert is a living thing, dangerous and changing. In the Kyoshi era, the Spirit Library is detectable by the few remaining towers poking out of the sands of the desert. The full shape of the library had long since been buried deep in the sands, though the contents are kept entirely safe. For enterprising academics and scholars, the best chance of actually arriving at the library is always to travel with the aid of the local Siwang tribes. These peoples have a long history in the desert, with a culture well adapted to the shifting sands, the scorching sun, and the lack of water. The tribe's people often trade with Wan Shi Tong, delivering valuable texts and knowledge in exchange for access to the library's archives and useful information. A sojourner with something to offer a tribe might hire a sand-bending guide and their desert skiff to safely arrive at the library. Otherwise, the sojourner is on their own to cross the desert and hopefully spot the few remaining spires in the distance. And this is effectively the level of information that we get for the eras before the Korra era. It's just that in the Kyoshi era, there's a few spires poking out of the ground. In the Roku era, you can't see them as much. In the 100-Year War era and Aang, 100-Year War era and ATLA itself, there's only a little bit of sort of one poking out. In the Aang era and the Korra era, it's in the spirit world. That's effectively all it says. Like, it's very subtle. But the new information there is obviously that the people of the Siwang Desert, some of the tribes, in the past, in Kyoshi's era, traded with Wan Shi Tong. He would actually give them knowledge and work with them. So people were familiar in the desert with where the library was and helped people get there. In the Roku era, the library has sunk deeper into the sands, where once the Siwang tribes might have helped to keep the sands away, their association with Wan Shi Tong has grown more and more fraught. The sojourners of knowledge who last came to the library soured the Great Spirit on humanity, as many of them were not interested in knowledge for knowledge's sake, but instead sought ways to gain an advantage for their nation over others. He blamed the Siwang tribespeople for the actions of those they delivered to the library, banning them from any future access to the vast repository of learning. Without reason to return, they no longer help keep the library from sinking deeper beneath the sands. And they just covered the idea that there might be a few people left from the Siwang tribes who will be willing to guide people towards the library. But just connecting those ideas of, in the Kyoshi era, he traded and had a good relationship with the tribes, but the tribes began to bring too many people to the library. That soured him a bit, so he doesn't interact as much with the tribes anymore. The 100-Year War era effectively just covers what Zhao did. The only interesting thing in this is just that it says that Zhao gave Wan Shi Tong knowledge of the Fire Nation war machines and then sought the source of Waterbender's power. So he did exchange knowledge with Wan Shi Tong to get in. It's just that I suppose he then destroyed all of that, as we of course saw. So Wan Shi Tong remains infuriated by Zhao's offenses and destruction, and only the bear's tip of the library's tallest tower is visible above the sands now, and Wan Shi Tong is fine with that. Now, Aang and Korra's era is obviously when he's brought it back to the spirit world as a result of what happened in the library, of course. Aang era, the library is gone from the physical world. Although the knowledge seekers do find their way back into the physical world, Wan Shi Tong is now incensed with humanity and the Avatar in particular. Some lucky few might be able to reach the library through spiritual communion or even by traveling to the spirit world, but even then, their pursuit is dangerous. He doesn't want villagers and will lash out, of people, even if they bring knowledge. So that's the worst era for Wan Shi Tong. The Korra era is probably the most significant piece of new information because it's one of the few times that this book ever gives you sort of a glance into the future of like what we maybe could see. In Korra's era, Wan Shi Tong's opinion on humanity is poised to change. Wan Shi Tong for a time allied with Unalaq, believing that Unalaq better served the spirits than the Avatar ever did. He thought that Unalaq might help bring an end to humans' destructive, terrible tendencies, and that he might then continue his pursuit of knowledge without the threat of greedy humans. But when Unalaq revealed his true plans, Wan Shi Tong was shocked. He had not anticipated the extent of the imbalance Unalaq sought to inflict upon the world. Avatar Korra successfully defeated Unavatu and then kept the spirit portals open, leading Wan Shi Tong to re-examine some of his beliefs. Now that humans can try and reach the spirit library by passing directly through a portal, Wan Shi Tong has decided to give them a second chance. He still requires every visitor to bring new knowledge to the library and remains wary, watching to ensure no human tries to learn simply for the sake of power. But he is willing to do his part to bridge the gap between spirits and humans for knowledge's sake, if nothing else. After all, humans have made so many incredible advancements in knowledge that his knowledge seekers have not discovered them all. His best way of learning may now be through humans themselves. So this is great because the last time in canon we saw Wan Shi Tong was some of the later episodes of book 2, but it was still like not really involved in the finale or anything like that. We're talking like episode 10 here, I believe, was when we saw this last. So a lot kind of of time passes and we're just like, okay, he allied himself with Unalaq, but where does he stand after everything that's happened? They are now telling us that Wan Shi Tong thought that Unalaq went too far, after we last saw him, and now is giving humanity a second chance, realizing that I suppose Korra helped to bridge the gap between humans and spirits, and he's going to try and do the same. And this is something I've kind of been asking for in Korra content going forward, is that Korra's main plot, I think, going forward has to be the human-spirit conflict. And so far, we've mainly seen that of like Korra discussing the dynamic with the kind of dragon eel spirit thing that talks, but he doesn't seem like that great of a spirit character and just seems to have the spirit typical line on things. So I'd like to see Korra talk to another spirit who's capable of communication, and someone like Wan Shi Tong, who is a really noted spirit who I suppose knows humanity and knows the history. That would be a really fun dynamic to actually have, I think. And especially because Jinora has met Wan Shi Tong, I think Korra and Jinora could have a pretty cool dynamic with him now that he's trying again. Is there any significance to this information? I hope so, but it all depends on, I suppose, how would they come across Wan Shi Tong? Does he send a knowledge seeker out to kind of meet with Korra? Does she decide to travel to the spirit world to meet with him herself? There's a few ideas, but that's that. The next section, how to get to the library. They just covered the idea of spiritual meditation being the way to get there. Otherwise, you need to cross the desert, and it goes more into the game mechanics here of how you should, as a GM, run kind of a trek through the desert and all this sort of stuff. It covers the really obvious stuff of like you need supplies. If you have access to flight, it'll be a lot easier. The spirit world has problems if you go that way, and so on. It covers the whole idea of, when you do and don't have bending, it's pretty easy. I think everyone understands it at this point. They cover, searching the library if you do get in. How do you deal with Wan Shi Tong? How do you deal with Wan Shi Tong if you get into a fight with him? Which effectively, it's kind of weird that they basically say, you can't really fight Wan Shi Tong. You can do like what they did in the library and sort of aim attacks at him that sort of, slow him down a bit. But they get across the idea that you seemingly can't ever defeat Wan Shi Tong. Now, I get it, like, he's meant to be a very powerful spirit, but, like, I would guess, like, an avatar in the avatar state or a group of very, very powerful benders would be able to technically, quote-unquote, kill Wan Shi Tong if they had to. I get they probably don't want you doing that because it's more of a villainous act against Wan Shi Tong here, but they don't even bring up the idea. They're just like, don't even bother with that. Which, for a game about sort of, for the most part, being open, doing it yourself, they seem to more than often kind of say, yeah, don't do that, which is kind of weird. They talk about bargaining with Wan Shi Tong, but again, very little of this is directly like canon information. They begin to mix the setting with playing the game here, so it's kind of tough to pick out actual info. But there's, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing really else that's like new here as such. Seeking information, there's a few ideas for what things you could ask for. How do you sneak around the library to find stuff out? Treasures, finding a new plan or purpose. It's just the idea of like reasons you would go to the library. Then they do have a section, era-specific hooks. So basically, a brief adventure idea for if you wanted to do an adventure in each era that involves the library. So the Kyoshi Era hook for the library is the Paper Knives. A group of Dao Fei, the Paper Knives, have successfully stolen a tome of great value and importance from Wan Shi Tong's library. The tome details the secrets of Ba Sing Se's construction that might give them the edge they need to sneak within the city and even threaten the Earth King. Wan Shi Tong, infuriated by the Dao Fei's insolence, dispatched knowledge seekers to find them and to alert the Avatar. Unfortunately, Kyoshi has no time to rescue a book. She doesn't fully understand what's inside the book, and she's dealing with other crises involving people and their lives. She ultimately sets the task of book recovery to friends and allies who pass it down the grapevine to the companions. Can they free the tome from the Dao Fei's clutches and return it to Wan Shi Tong before the bandits use the information contained within it to attack the Earth King? So an interesting idea. Dao Fei, a new group name, is the Paper Knives. The idea that in Wan Shi Tong's library is the details on the construction of the walls, which I guess there's something special about it, which is why they're so difficult to break through. It'd be interesting to know if there is something special about like whatever sort of earth they use or the way it's constructed. That would be nice to know. But the Roku Era hook is called Machines of War. A fire sage, Bu Kujan, has become aware of other sages and officers in the Fire Nation planning to seek out the Spirit Library to ransack it for any plans of ancient war machines and weapons. Bu Kujan has been trying to stop them subtly, but every effort has failed, and he remains terribly worried about what might happen if those plans fall into the hands of his nation's military leadership. He collects the companions to accompany him on a trip to the library to get there first, and then he plans to burn the most dangerous records and knowledge with it, even if it brings the wrath of Wan Shi Tong down upon him. So that's very interesting. In the Roku era, where they're already developing good technology, this is about the library having ancient war machines, which is a very, very interesting idea that because there's thousands of years of history in the Avatar universe, like what were some of those early crazy things that people came up with? That is an interesting idea. The 100-Year War Era hook is Stolen Maps. A knowledge seeker successfully ranged very far south in the world and found knowledge that seemed quite valuable in a village raided by the Fire Nation. Hidden maps that lay out the location of hidden Southern Water Tribe villages, handmade by one of the best sailors in all the Southern Water Tribe. The knowledge seeker took the maps from the village to bring them back to the library. The sailor cartographer, Kuniak, knows the maps were taken by a knowledge seeker, but she doesn't know much about the Spirit Library, especially where to find it. She pleads with the companions to help make sure that the maps don't wind up anywhere near with anyone from the Fire Nation, or otherwise compromise the safety of the hidden villages. So that is something addressed in the 100-Year War era, that there is a secret Water Tribe villages, and yeah, what if the knowledge seeker just took them and someone was aware of this, and so here's someone trying to stop that. The Aang Era hook is called Sniffing Out the Truth. Things haven't been going well for academic Ruikan Xiang in her home of Cranefish Town. She's known as Little Xiang, thanks to her older sister and successful academic wise Xiang, she can never seem to measure up to her sister's accomplishments and is always one step behind. But Ruqian has a plan to change her look. She spread rumors around town that there is an ancient tome hidden within the city which supports every theory she's spouted so far. Ruqian rumors have embedded themselves in the town so thoroughly that word has even reached the spirit world of this wondrous tome. Wan Shi Tong has sent his knowledge seekers to town in search of the tome, and in turn they're causing all sorts of mischief throughout the city. Can the player characters uncover what's going on before the horde of knowledge seekers accidentally causes a disaster looking for the fake tome? That one doesn't seem like super interesting. It's an interesting concept because it's like, oh, does Wan Shi Tong often hear about knowledge that turns out to actually be like false, and how does he confirm what is true or not? And so that's at least addressing that, but it doesn't seem the most interesting overall, I would say. The Korra Era hook is Legacy of the Air Nomads. Knowledge seekers from the Spirit Library successfully preserved an airbender training tool taken by the seekers from the ruins of the Northern Air Temple. Although it became inaccessible to humanity after Wan Shi Tong took the library back to the spirit world, a new airbender named Gyume, Gyume, discovered a story about some Fire Nation soldiers ready to destroy the tool before a pack of blue-eyed fox spirits stole it away in the night. Gyume is sure these were knowledge seekers. Gyume believes that recovering this tool will be a great boon to helping to connect the new Air Nation members to the history of the Air Nomads. She pleads with the companions to accompany her on a trip through Republic City portal to find the library, a quest which Tenzin explicitly forbade. So that's interesting enough. They do use Air Nomad relics quite a bit as just, here's a story. But, that seems fine overall. So that's the Wan Shi Tong section. That's all of chapter 1 there. So as you can see there, it's only minor information about basically the tribes of the Siwang Desert interacting with Wan Shi Tong in previous eras, and then that Wan Shi Tong is actually giving humanity a second chance here. So he's more open in the Korra era. That's really the only significant information that we have here. Next is the Legends NPC section, and if you know anything about this book, this will probably be the bit that you maybe know about because people are posting the images of these characters around the place and are quite excited by it because it feels sort of new. There's not really new information in it, but it's kind of interesting. So let me just turn this on for a second. So you can see the image of Rangi already, but this is significant because it is our first time seeing Rangi in the official show style, basically. Before this, the only official depiction of Rangi we had was in the Kyoshi novel, cover artist style. Otherwise, it was fan art that we'd seen. So it is fun to see this kind of fully locked in place as being this is Rangi's design, which effectively is based on a fan artist's design. So that's a very cool thing with this book, that it is pretty accurate overall. The other thing people have been pointing out with this one is that is this a slightly older Rangi than we know from the books? It could be her in the right age, but I think a few people may be thinking it's her just maybe a couple of years afterwards, just to match the fact that I think the Kyoshi image definitely looks like it's her a little bit older. But either way, just a cool look here to see Rangi overall. Again, the information, it's a pretty nice description overall, but there's nothing significant there. They do have this section that's more about the game for each of the characters, where it covers how they are as a teacher. But we know that from the story already. There's not too much to really say here. There's nothing really significant overall. They do give her jet stepping as a technique, as well as white fire. So they acknowledge that she has unique skills, which is kind of cool. And then where to find her, and again, it's more she's an important character, but she's usually found in the really big places in the world, or potentially the Royal Fire Academy for girls. Next we have Taokukak, which is really cool. This is actually one of the other sections where there probably is the most information, and I wonder why there's the most information here. Well, it's because it's a Roku Era character, so they add to it. So we learned more about Taokukak in the core book because there was a little section on him in the Water Tribe. But you get a full history of the character. So this is Roku's waterbending master. So we'll read through this because it's actually quite good. Taokukak grew up in the prosperous Northern Water Tribe in a time of peace and spirituality in the late Kyoshi era. As a child, Taokukak was always connected to the spirit world of the North. His ability to observe the world through eyes that saw more than just the surface allowed him to transcend his humble birth. He was fascinated by the spirits that inhabited his home, most of all the spirits Tui and La, the moon and the ocean. He watched and studied them, discerning the secrets of waterbending from their movement. So that's cool. He is a waterbender who is specifically noted to have, I suppose, helped his waterbending abilities by watching Tui and La. So that's interesting. As a kind young man, Taokukak sought ways to serve the Northern Water Tribe. His soft-spoken nature, innate charisma, and forceful personality made him a perfect fit as a diplomat for the chief of the Northern Water Tribe. In that role, he traveled across the world to strengthen alliances with other nations, but the tensions of the world made espionage an undercurrent of his diplomatic journeys. Not everyone he dealt with was earnest in the desire to cooperate, and Taokukak quickly learned the words and deeds are not the same in diplomatic circles. While investigating allegations of stolen Water Tribe technology, he learned one of his colleagues, his best friend Nai, was selling secrets to the Fire Nation. Nai was a paragon of the Northern Water Tribe, thought to be a selfless champion, volunteering for the most dangerous and difficult missions. Nai's shock betrayal shook Taokukak to the core, and he promised himself to never trust so easily again. As the years marched on, Taokukak gained the title of Master. His ability to whip up a quick fog allowed him to slip past many security checkpoints and trade blockades without a whisper of trouble. By the time he earned the title, no one could question his prowess as a waterbender. After Roku's training with the Air Nomads, the Avatar requested Taokukak teach him waterbending. The Master originally refused Roku's request, having been betrayed by the Fire Nation as a young man. The waterbender feared an Avatar from the Fire Nation would place loyalty to the Fire Lord above all else. However, Roku surprised him by moving to the Northern Water Tribe, learning from and living in service of the locals for several years. The Master noticed something different about Roku, an openness and willingness to learn that he could trust, and so Taokukak finally agreed to teach the Avatar, and he opened himself up to what became a lifelong friendship. So as a teacher, he was hesitant to train Roku. Again, they cover more or less the same thing from before. You know, he's got diplomacy, he's balanced, he has an expertise, and so on. Like you need to prove yourself like Roku proved himself. That's what's going on here. He's an active diplomat and leader in the world. He, Northern Water Tribe makes sense. He's involved in the Fire and Brimstone adventure story, which we will get to. He also undertakes covert missions as well. So, you could find him effectively anywhere is what they're saying, but very, very cool character. There's nothing really to say about Long Feng, other than like nice piece of art, but everything that's presented here is pretty, fine, on track. They cover like the more subtle information that, he was well positioned when a new and vulnerable Earth King rose to the throne at the age of 4. Again, we knew that already, but, it's nice that it gets brought up here. They just cover, as a teacher, you have to really pay respects to him. That's the sort of character he is. Azula, I maybe wish we had more of, maybe a comic design Azula, maybe even Komura Kage Azula here, just to represent kind of that it is an Aang era character. They cover at the end here, they masqueraded as the Komura Kage and exerted their influence over the reactionary New Ozai society, but Azula maintains that her true purpose is to seize the Fire Nation throne, and technically, it's not maybe the best wording, but it's okay. Here she is as a teacher, where to find her, and they just covered the idea that she's probably on the edges of the Fire Nation, more than likely. Now, here we go. Katara's image here is fantastic because it's a comic era Katara from Imbalance. But that design done in the official show art style. So it's really, really cool to see just new art of this. And it's kind of what I've in a way been saying, and what a lot of fans hope for, is that when you do the merchandise right now, it's cool that you're doing it, and like a lot of this merchandise hasn't been done before. But we're at the point where people sort of want the either late series stuff or even the comic era characters designs, not book one Zuko in 2022. So, you know, when are we going to get our more modern stuff? And again, look, the history stuff here, it's nicely written. It's a nice recap of, you can tell someone who watched the shows definitely was the one who wrote this. But there's nothing new here, is the main thing to say in all of this. You know, it really gets across in her as a teacher that she's a very good teacher. That, you know, she's important, but she will try to help you. So, you know, one of the better teachers on the list, of course. You can see the attacks that she has and so on, where to find her. Again, it doesn't give you any information necessarily other than that roughly in this era she could be here, there, or there. Nothing over significant. Similarly, Sokka gets his imbalanced design done in the official show style. Really nice image of Sokka here. Again, the description I think is quite good. I like the bit here of, you know, his true destiny as an inventor and a leader. And I kind of like that, you know, he has the warrior skills and he's good, but this is where he really shines as an inventor and as a leader. So that's kind of cool also. So yeah, you know, they mentioned Suki a little bit in this, and of course Suki is up next. You know, really cool, her in her full Kyoshi warrior outfit here. Very nice image of Suki. Description again is pretty on point. Nothing too much to say really. How Suki is a teacher, where to find Suki, and so on. She also tries to return home to Kyoshi Island as much as possible. Just, you know, the basics. So new image of Toph, quite nice. But again, the description is basically, you know, exactly what you'd expect. She's a good teacher now because of the academy and so on. New image of Ty Lee here, which covers all the stuff here. I like, you know, they mention her 6 identical sisters and so on. She's a Kyoshi warrior now. She also can be a good teacher. You know, it's fine. Zuko looks fantastic here. Fire Lord Zuko. Again, do action figures of Fire Lord Zuko, please. In this look, not the end of series look, please. This is definitely the one I would want. But again, nothing too much to talk about here. It's well written, but you know, it's just NPC Legend Zuko. Asami Sado. The only real thing to mention here is I like that they mention her mother. Like the only reason we know the name is because of a random like family tree thing they put up on Nick.com a few years ago. So it's nice that they at least mention the name, even if they don't go into any more detail other than just an Agni Kai Triad member killed her mother. But yeah, nice image of Asami, and again, the same typical details. Kuvira gets mentioned here. Here she is in her more kind of the outfit that she typically wears while under sort of house arrest, basically. And again, they basically just cover the idea. They include Ruins of the Empire in her description, and also the whole idea of you will have to go to Zaofu to find her to be a teacher. Tenzin, nice image. Nothing else to really say here. We know all the stuff with him. Varric is included here because he's kind of the central character for the Korra Adventure story. There is actually a lot of Varric information in that, which we'll get to. They don't really cover it here as such. Really, do they cover this? Yeah, they quickly skip over, but we'll get to that later on down the road. But that's the situation now with him, and yeah, from there we go into the section on the playbooks. So yeah, I'll just show you the visuals here. There's 4 new playbooks, and these are another time where we get to see the new art. Now again, these are just sample characters to represent like what they view as being an example of this character. They're not actual like canonical characters, they're just cool looking images. So there is the Destined, very cool there, firebender with some fancy hair. Yeah, we have another older character here, so cool look going on here, and yeah, some technology included here. The Foundling is kind of cool in that I'm guessing this is half air nomad, half firebender kind of going on here. So this is probably some sort of like a firebender kind of character who got airbending in the Korra era, perhaps? Or is this what they're maybe envisioning what like a young noble is like in the Roku era, with the influence of the air nomad culture on them through the center or whatever. Either way, it's sort of like a cool idea for a character. Definitely the Razor. A lot of people like this one because, of course, the character's missing an arm here, but has the rock fist. So a little bit of sort of, kind of psychic earthbending kind of going on there, which is very, very cool. And there's another image of her down here. So that seems quite cool overall. And then this gets into the adventure books, which are like basically the remaining chapters of this. So I'll turn this off as we go into this one. So the first one here, Earth and Root, this is the Kyoshi Era Adventure. Now, like I said before, these ones are weird to talk about because they give you quite an in-depth sort of background, location, here are the key characters, but because ultimately the way the plot goes is up to the game and how you play it and how your characters are involved in that, there's no kind of resolution to it. So there's no like canonical ending to all of this. So it's just sort of an incident that I guess happens that involves certain key characters, but you never know what actually happens with it. So it's kind of weird in that, like for this one, Rangi is actually included here. That's part of why she is a legend NPC character, is that you can use her to be involved in this story. So the premise right at the start here is that the lower ring of Ba Sing Se is in chaos after a Dao Fei outlaw kidnaps the two children of Fire Nation ambassador Quinn, I'm not sure about that, Quinn. The ambassador has called in her own highly skilled Fire Nation guards to find her children because she is mistrustful of the Earth Kingdom Anti-Corruption Task Force called in to do the job. And the ambassador is right to be suspicious. The task force is using the event as an excuse to finally round up all the criminals they want, regardless of whether they had anything to do with the kidnapping. And the new Dao Fei mercenary group is using the distraction to wreak havoc in the lower ring. It's a mess, and famed firebender Rangi knows that without intervention, Ba Sing Se is in trouble. She tasks the heroes with ensuring the lower ring of Ba Sing Se stays stable until she can return with the Avatar. So while Rangi is involved in this, they do everything they can in this to have you not involve her in the story. So it's a weird kind of dynamic in that they have to use the legend characters to get people hyped up for this, but they really don't want you to use these characters whatsoever. They just want Rangi to be like the quest giver and then come back at the end and be like, well done. And they're basically like throughout this whole thing, do not use Kyoshi in this story. It will resolve everything for you. Just have Kyoshi come in at the end with Rangi or something like that. That's all you should do. So several conflicts going on here. The ambassador, her guard Tan, and Tan's firebender guards, who all want the kidnapped children back as quick as possible. The anti-corruption task force of Yang and his earthbenders, who used the kidnapping as an excuse to round up criminals, but little care if the children are found. Lei Fang, Hana, and the Fanged mercenaries who kidnapped the children, framed the ex-Dao Fei vigilante Meng Yao for the kidnapping and are using the ensuing chaos for crime. Meng Yao, the vigilante who's trying to clear her name. So, yeah, it just covers, it goes in depth a little bit on all of these dynamics here of basically what's going on here. Rangi asks the group to find Meng Yao and the children before things get out of hand. That's the kind of story that's going on here. There's the kidnapping, who the two children's name are Garel and Keiko. Disappeared from a tea house in the middle ring. And I think we should just probably go to the characters here, I think. Because again, they cover like a lot of the background stuff, so it's hard to maybe get a sense for the story exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So the where you start section is the adventure starts with Rangi meeting the heroes to ask them to help find Meng Yao, the culprit suspected in the kidnapping of the ambassador's children. Rangi also asks the player characters to keep the lower rings of Ba Sing Se stable while she leaves to alert the Avatar what's going on. As Rangi is leaving, a group of guards dressed in the telltale green of the Earth Kingdom brush past the shopkeeper and into one of the stalls. So yeah, Rangi is involved in this. Yeah, she's not in charge of the Dao Fei task force, but she has been working with it before Kyoshi left. She doesn't have the sway that the Avatar has. Rangi doesn't believe she has the authority to seize control of the situation, and she's too recognizable to move quietly in the city. So she's going to get Kyoshi to make all that happen. Meng Yao is a bow-wielding ex-Dao Fei who has been living in the lower ring since childhood. She's had multiple clashes with Hana over the years, and while the two haven't interacted since Meng Yao became a vigilante, the old animosity was enough for Hana to target Meng Yao the instant she became a threat to the Fanged mercenaries. As Hana and Lei Fang successfully turn the anti-corruption task force against Meng Yao, she has to go on the move to keep herself safe. So she's trying to kind of exonerate herself. The Fanged mercenaries are a group, is the name of the Dao Fei group. It's Lei Fang and Hana's group. A select few have been around since the Triad of the Golden Wing. Every one of them owes either of these two characters for saving them from getting caught. Okay, Hana was Mok's second in command in the Triad of the Golden Wing, and an earthbender with an expertise in sandbending, so that's kind of interesting. Hana only escaped capture because she was away on a smuggling mission that day. She later found a few holdouts who escaped the attack, and that's how they formed this group. Lei Fang, one of the gang's bruisers, started a mercenary group and invited several old gang members to join him. It wasn't long before, that's how they kind of came together. We also have Ambassador Quinn, of course, Tan's firebenders. Tan is a skilled firebender and a leader of the group of Fire Nation soldiers who she's brought in, of course. The anti-corruption task force led by Yang. Important locations we have here. So we have Meng Yao's hideout, Long Cow's Lucky Pocket. This area of the lower ring was once completely overtaken by the Triad of the Golden Wing. Again, it's trying to find the scattered information with the way that they sort of present this, and what is and is not like important. And then because, again, we're never going to get the answer to this story, how much of this is important to bring up and how much of it isn't. Gon's Noodle Shop, Wood Fried Lumber Yard, Lowtown Laundry. These are all just sort of places in the lower ring. Getting around town, escalations, the role of Rangi and the Avatar. They basically, this is where they really covered the idea of, you might want to involve Rangi in like the final fight, but she shouldn't be a main character in the story. Kyoshi probably shouldn't be involved at all, but you can use her if you want, is basically the approach here. And then, like, again, because they don't want to commit to like what the story actually is, it's a lot of text to kind of go through. Here's how you could go about proving Meng Yao's innocence. Here's how you could do the dynamic between Hana and Lei Fang as the leader of the Fanged mercenaries. Here's how you could do the firebenders facing off against the task force. They do at the end cover the idea that, you know, you couldn't use this list of pre-generated characters, and they give you 5 characters to use. Now, there's a description for each of these characters, but I don't think these characters are ultimately meant to be considered canon, because I think the second they give you a page that is like a player character page filled out is where the sort of canonicity sort of ends. So there's that. So the companions are a group of mostly former outlaws located in Ba Sing Se, trying to make right for their past misdeeds. They're outcasts bound together by a shared history and loyalty to one another. Most of the companions went straight before the anti-corruption task force was left to its own devices, and now they're technically on the right side of the law. So that's just the idea if you want to use those characters yourself. But we'll move on to the next story. So this is the Roku Era story, which is called Fire and Brimstone. So this involves Takukak, of course. That's why you get him as a legend NPC. It doesn't seem to involve Roku like whatsoever, basically. So the idea here is the greatest minds from all nations of the world gather for the 4 Nations Summit and Technological Symposium in the Fire Nation, each hoping to be the delegation with a breakthrough finding that will one-up their academic rivals. Just as the summit begins, the Fire Nation delegate Kuchte announces that multiple crates of precious meteorite metal were stolen from the Fire Nation and must be returned. Everyone at the summit is under suspicion, and if the thief isn't found soon, Kuchte is willing to take extreme measures. Takukak, Avatar Roku's waterbending teacher and one of the summit delegates, delegates, tasks the heroes with finding the thief before it's too late. Can they uncover the truth and restore peace before mistrust turns to war? So there's that. The summary here is, the summit is taking place in Haribulkan, in the capital of the Fire Nation. It's set to last an entire week, and they'll each present different technological advancements from their nations. Kuchite, trailed by Captain Anaka of the Fire Nation Guard, bursts into the hall and announces that someone has stolen multiple crates of rare meteorite metal from the Fire Nation. She doesn't halt the conference. All eyes are on the Fire Nation, and she wants it to be a success, but she's ordered a patrol of guards to roam the halls and demands that the crates be returned immediately. Togokok was sent by Roku to ensure everything went smoothly. They saw an incident potentially happening, and the waterbender doesn't want to out himself as Roku's spy, and Togokok knows the heroes from an established event in the introduction, so he tasks them with finding him the crates before it's too late. There are 3 suspects. Sumati, who is an air nomad aiding a spirit attached to the meteorite metal. Pohu, who is Togokok's jealous rival from the Southern Water Tribe. And Ikru, an inventor with a secondary mission to spy for the Earth Kingdom. So that's what's going on here. And again, they don't tell you canonically who actually stole it. That's up to you and how the story goes. But it's at least an interesting kind of concept overall. Meteorite metal crates. Meteorite metal is used to create unbreakable weapons, and this property, plus its scarcity, makes it more valuable than gold. The crate comprises the largest cache of the meteorite metal in the entire world. Kuchite planned to unveil samples from the cache at the summit as a point of pride. Her plan was to use the metal to build various new machines for the Fire Nation, maybe even a tank, which she's heard the Fire Lord has been particularly interested in. The crates currently sit in a supposedly empty compartment in the summit storehouse. At the start of the adventure, only the thief knows of their presence there, and so on. Suspects, Sumati is the air nomad's motive for stealing the crates is actually altruistic. She was drawn to the spiritual presence in the Fire Nation capital city, ultimately discovering the crates where they were being stored near Kuchite's workshops. Inside the crates, she discovered rust, the spirit drawn to the meteorite metal. Unbeknownst to the leader of the air nomad delegation, Ugyan, Sumati snuck out in the days leading up to the conference, meeting with the spirit to find a way to appease them. Since rust has tied themselves to the metal, Sumati is worried what will happen to the spirit if the metal is destroyed or forged. So that's the kind of air nomad kind of connection here, wanting to help this spirit. Pohu, who is Togokok's rival, just wants this metal to improve his career. Let's see, he wants to work with the material, an academic rival of Togokok that is often overlooked in favor of Togokok. So he sees the theft as a way to completely surpass his rival in their field and take Togokok's place on new projects. Ikru is the head of the delegate for the Earth Kingdom, has the resources to arrange them to be moved out of the workshops, but the motive is more mixed. If he's responsible, he stole the crates to bring them back to the Earth King and earn the prestige of designing something using this small fortune. He also suspects the Fire Nation is up to no good with the ore on the basis that he's always mistrusted his Fire Nation colleagues. So yeah, he thinks they're going to be used for war machine prototypes. So that's that. So yeah, that's a lot of the characters here. Now, we'll do the section on Rust here, the spirit. They do actually have a whole section on this character. Rust is a tiny spirit who appears as a shimmering, translucent, elderly humanoid, albeit only a foot tall. Their name comes from the fact that their skin and clothes both appear to be made out of orange rust flakes. Rust was drawn to the physical world after the Fire Nation piled a huge amount of meteorite metal together. They've been orbiting around the metal, appearing and disappearing at will, following it wherever it goes. Once Rust arrived at the summit, they were curious about what was happening and decided to observe. It's been a long time since they've been to the physical world, and they are largely disappointed by the scheming and greed that they've seen. As the summit progresses, the spirit takes on the negative energy of the attendants. Everyone is distrustful of one another, angry, and on the brink of fighting. This throws the spirit out of balance. Each time someone takes a violently or massively aggressive action against another person, Rust's balance track is shifted towards their chaos principle by 1. So this is more game mechanics, but the idea is when they go full chaos, they become a dark spirit and go on a rampage, effectively. Rust becomes a dangerous dark spirit and rampages the summit. They cannot be fought using traditional combat exchanges. Attempts to do so end with the PCs getting tossed away easily. Instead, they must bring Rust back into balance. So they don't really explain the exact details of how powerful Rust gets, but the idea is the spirit takes on some sort of different form as a dark spirit. So that is a cool dynamic to have here. The Air character who's trying to sort of fix this. And you can see that I think this one seems a lot more interesting as a dynamic overall than I think the kind of previous one. Just in terms of kind of what's going on here. And you can tell that it's a Roku Era one and that the dynamics just feel a little bit more interesting overall. So what's going on here? So, getting started. The start of the summit was an opening ceremony where each of the 5 delegations introduced their members and performed an intricate display of their culture's dances and music. So that's interesting. This is where the guy bursts into the event, announces the theft, demanding the thief reveal themselves, and so on. Talcog approaches the characters covertly, explaining the situation and asking for help, letting the players take it from there. So that's kind of interesting overall. So then they go over the characters here. Talcog is here, of course, we know. He and Roku still work together quietly, but publicly Talcog has tried to maintain his distance from the Avatar to ensure he isn't hindered by accusations of being Roku's puppet. And then we've covered a lot of the other characters here. Captain Anaka, Ugyen. Again, they cover all the delegates and so on. That's the dynamic going on here. We're in the Fire Nation, of course, so we have Zoryu Hall, which is part school, part meeting hall, part auditorium, named in honor of Fire Lord Zoryu. There's the Twisting Dragons, is a 10-foot tall metal sculpture made by master artist Fusei. Depicts a pair of dragons rising from the ground, spiraling around each other, and they breathe flame at the top of every hour. So that's kind of cool. Meeting rooms, tea rooms. Taco Dormitory is a square 3-level building with a lush garden in the center, in the middle of Harry Bulkan. So these are the Summit storehouse, of course. This is where the metal is. So, just some Fire Nation stuff, kind of high up, obvious sort of places overall. There's also pre-generated characters for this one if you want to do this campaign as well. But yeah, it's one of those ones where, I don't want to go crazy in depth into these while, a lot of it is, super, super unclear. So we'll move on to the next one here, which is the 100-Year War era story, which is called Ash and Steel. So this one, the intro is this. The companions are tasked with providing security for Anomu, a Fire Nation defector who is offering war plans stolen from from Fire Lord Ozai's palace to Grand Secretariat Longfeng in exchange for asylum in Ba Sing Se. A hero's job is never easy, and few obstacles stand in their way. The Armadillo Bears, a group of Earth Kingdom rebels, heard Anamu is in the Earth Kingdom and want to capture her. That wasn't enough to worry about. The Rough Rhinos have orders to capture or kill the defector and destroy the war plans at all costs. Meanwhile, from the shadows, Longfeng moves his pieces across the pie show table, benefiting greatly from the chaos. So, interesting idea here overall. Fire Nation defector. Of course, the high-ups of the Fire Nation want to kill her. Longfeng wants to use her information, but doesn't actually care about her as a person. And your job is to get her there safely. So, kind of pretty, standard stuff here. For some reason, this is an era that they don't tend to want to do anything overly significant in, so it's not the most fascinating story, but it's interesting enough. Anamu is conspicuous in the Earth Kingdom thanks to her former rank and position, an embarrassment to Ozai, and then Longfeng doesn't actually want Anamu to survive himself. So all the manipulation going on in this era. We have some interesting locations such as West Hayatu, Heiatu, which is a Fire Nation colony in the Earth Kingdom. So there's that. Sobai Oasis, which is a remote oasis of peaceful tranquility. that is yet to be affected by the war. There's Xiadi, Xiadi, an underground rebel city where the heroes must decide whether to plead for passage or sneak through. There's Laoshan, which is a destitute town next to a rich mine the Fire Nation exploits for ore. So that's what's going on here. And I think this one is rather self-explanatory overall. It's a pretty basic idea of, war plans, get them to the Earth Kingdom, which is the main opposition to the Fire Nation, but there's plotting going on. There's not too much, crazy detail going on here. Yeah, Long Feng, Onomu, Yanran, who is a secret spy for Long Feng. Interesting enough. Dai Li agents, the Armadillo Bears. Ben Ta is the leader of the Armadillo Bears. Colonel Monkey is here. They do give a brief description on each of these characters. I don't think there's too much more than what we already know. Before he was a mercenary, Monkey served under General Iroh in the Fire Nation army. When Iroh gave up his command, Monkey and his squad of cavalry broke from the army, becoming mercenaries. And yeah, that's what he does now. Ogode from the Rough Rhinos, once a Fire Nation engineer, he enjoys fighting and humiliating his opponents using his bolas and chain. Sadly for him, while bolas and chains are highly effective against his opponents, they can easily be turned against him. So that's that. Kachi from the Rough Rhinos is a Guandao weapons master, a strategist, mission-orientated, but most likely to actually consider the retreat in appropriate situations, but he's not actually the leader. So he probably should be the leader over Monkey, but Monkey is the more powerful one. Yalu is a former weapons developer for the Fire Nation. He wears an opposing metal helmet to hide a large scar from an explosives accident years ago. He hasn't stopped his research and is now a certified explosives specialist. He's still deeply fascinated with it and devoted to his explosives and conflagrations, to the point he will often take overly dangerous actions in the middle of a fight to test out a new combustible device. Bashir, we know his backstory from the search, and they basically referenced that here. Disgraced due to a failure, dishonorable discharge from the Yuyan archers, and so on. So there's that. West Haitao is a long-established Fire Nation colony in Earth Kingdom. I do think for some of these ones they could use more of a map, because I think they had a small, very basic map for the Forbidden Scroll adventure just to get across the location you're in. I think they could do that for some of these places just to get it across a little bit more overall. That would definitely help. Xiadi is the heart of the Earth Kingdom is a dangerous place, with bands of Fire Nation soldiers roving the lands and rebels attacking various outposts. Traveling overland or by river is impossible, putting the PCs in danger of facing large patrols of soldiers and various checkpoints. So you have to travel through the rebel stronghold of Xiadi. It's a secret rebel base deep in the earth. The chamber that houses Xiadi is a massive sphere of stone and earth lit by countless glowworm jars, and it's mostly underground as well. Underground tunnels connect this place to various key locations throughout the land, and this is how they avoid just traveling across basically the top of the Earth Kingdom. So it's an interesting concept. That actually seems like a kind of major kind of location type thing that probably is still the case in the middle of the Earth Kingdom. Armadillo Bears get mentioned here, and stuff like that. Laoshan, Outpost of Bossing Say. Again, this one's not the most interesting to go into. Again, they give you pre-generated characters for this one as well. But again, without sort of a resolution to this of if it actually means anything, it's hard to judge. So there's that. The next one here, the Aang Era story, is called Air and Wind. This one, the description is, the companions get a weird sense of deja vu when an earthbender with a hood approaches them, asking to talk in private. Then it hits them. They've seen her on a wanted poster for stealing from the Sparrowkeet Air, a corporation that develops and builds flying contraptions. The poster got her name right, Qian. I again, not sure how to pronounce that. Quan Yu, but she explains that the rest of the poster is false. She isn't a master thief, but instead an archaeologist. She discovered a lost air nomad artifact from the Eastern Air Temple, which dates back to right before the 100-Year War, but then she fled when she learned Sparrowkeet Heir's true motivation: to sell these items to the richest bidder. Kuan Yu believes that this valuable piece of history belongs to the whole world, or at least the last surviving airbender, and she wants the companions' help escaping Sparrowkeet Heir's clutches to deliver the artifact to Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy instead. As someone who trained with Toph for a time, Kuan Yu knows the legendary bender can get this artifact to the right people. So, interesting enough premise. We get introduced to a new sort of company here, Sparrowkeet Heir, and again, it's another plot that relates to Air Nomad artifacts, and she wants to return it and do the right thing. She has a connection to Toph, and that's her way to get it back, but they just want it for money. So that's the premise for the story. So that's what's going on here. And I suppose we need to get into the characters here first. They don't tell you what the artifact is. The artifact is up to you to kind of figure out what it actually is. Yu Dao is involved here as well, which is quite interesting. But let's get into this. So first, the companions and Kuan Yu need to get out of Boat Bottom. It's one of the locations. Kuan Yu brings them to the Jelly Shack and her hiding place. On the way there, they duck into an alleyway where they see the Sparrowkeet Heir guards combing the city. Just as the coast is clear, a tall man in a bulky coat bumps into Kuan Yu. She recovers to realize he stole the artifact. The PCs need to get the artifact back fast, but before the guards notice the commotion, the tall man is in fact two young thieves, Flint and Ember, who wouldn't be much of a problem if not for the fact that the city's now crawling with guards. So let's get into the characters here. Kuan Yu, skilled archaeologist who uses her earthbending prowess to help in her job. She studied for a time under Toph Beifong, having shown potential for metal bending, but declined further studies. The time it took to learn metal bending took too much away from her archaeological pursuits. After so much knowledge was squandered in the 100-Year War, she believes that knowledge should be freely shared with everyone. Hiding or selling Air Nomad artifacts directly opposed to everything she stands for, and that, you know, the Avatar deserves to have the last artifact here. She's characterized by her stern whisper of a voice, which she raises only in excitement when describing her studies and discoveries. Yuzhen Sr., Yuzhen, is the owner and CEO of Sparrowkeet Heir. Nicknamed Big Yuzhen, is an elderly man built his company by helping the Fire Nation innovate and improve their dirigibles during the war. He doesn't believe he's profited off the war and feels entitled to the Air Nomad artifacts because it was on his land and bought with his money. He'll do whatever he can to get it back, as long as it means bossing around someone else to get their hands dirty. He's rich and entitled and has little else to do with his time now that his son has taken over the actual day-to-day running of the business. When he's not obsessing over the stolen artifact, Big Yuzhen enjoys strategizing over his war miniatures and is particularly proud of his Sparrowkeet Heir dirigible minis that he's painted himself poorly. His son, Yuzhen Jr., or what do they call him? Is there a nickname here as well? Little Yuzhen, is a man of the modern age. Unlike his father, he doesn't think Sparrowkeet Heir is free from guilt for their actions during the war. And since he has started working for the company, he's tried his best to make what reparations he can by hiring from impoverished communities and giving back to the Earth Kingdom. Since accepting his role as president, the business has declined substantially, though through no fault of his own. The war is over, and the company's once biggest customer doesn't need war balloons anymore. Sparrowkeet Heir is hemorrhaging money, and if it doesn't get a cash influx soon, it will go bankrupt. Selling off the near invaluable Air Nomad artifact is a means to an end for Yuzhen Jr. It means his business can continue and pay his employees, and that's what's going on there. We have the guards here, Sparrowkeet Heir guards. We have Ume, who is a brilliant, if unconventional, inventor and architect. She learned everything she knows from her mother, who passed away during the war. And she sees her art as something to continue, not only because she loves it, but also to honor her mom. She's interested in the artistry of the Air Nomad artifact and wants to see if she can use it for new designs. So another character there. also get this water tribe group called the Snow Rats, led by Koa. The mercenary group is composed of survivors of the Southern Water Tribe from the war, who fought under him in the 100-Year War. Like their leader, the Snow Rats travel and take on bounties to provide for their families back home, because home is everything. Of what water tribes care about family quite a lot, of course. They're fiercely loyal to Koa and trust his judgment. If it means capturing the artifact at all costs, so be it. If that means prioritizing their morals over a payday, then that fierce loyalty could mean extra assistance from the Snow Rats, perhaps in the form of a small favor or a temporary distraction. So, just involving a little bit of everything in here. We get the Yu Dao Bounty Hunter Guild. We didn't know about this before. They're really adding extra stuff onto Yu Dao here. It operates throughout the Western Earth Kingdom. There's a bounty on Kuan Yu, of course, because of what happened. It hosts workshops on weaponry, martial arts, and branding. Members show off their expertise, and they introduce a few bounty hunter characters here. The Badger Frog Bounty Master dresses in green and brown suit with white fur trim and uses a Badger Frog tongue whip. His skill with the whip is real, but his tendency to loudly monologue in between strikes causes him a lot of trouble. Princess Flutterbat might look dainty, but uses a gliding suit to command the higher ground. She's masterful in catching a gust of wind and taking advantage of her momentum to strike up an opponent harder. She's also determined to prove herself by taking down the biggest foes possible. Now, she's not an airbender there, she just has some sort of a gliding suit that actually works. There's a guy called the Claw. He wields a claw. They don't talk much. They wear a metal mask, and the Claw's motivations aren't particularly obvious, but it seems as if the Claw just likes the work. Flint and Ember are two brothers, I believe. Yeah, who one carries the other on the shoulders, and one's an earthbender, one is a firebender. They're from Yu Dao, and their parents own the Iron Tavern, which is a location that's involved in this story. So there's Boat Bottom, the Jelly Shack, which is where the story starts. There's the Pump Yard. There's the dirigible site. Sparrowkeet's Air Flying Headquarters, which is an airship headquarters for the company, I guess, which is kind of cool. They get across as like a really big airship that just flies around the place. So that's really, really cool. Just that, I guess this is canon, that this is something that is happening in the Aang era. This is around. We have the Sparrowkeet Air Company, so I'd like that to be introduced at some point just to see what's going on with it. There's the planes, Ume's workshop, Sparrowkeet Station. The mountains of the Earth Kingdom are involved here. Eel Swan Sauna and the Flameo Hot Springs. Again, they go into a reasonable amount of depth about options for telling the story. There's the Iron Tavern, of course. This is related to, of course, a few of the other characters. Yu Dao gets mentioned here, obviously. The first Fire Nation colony, as we know. Beifong Metal Bending Academy is sort of the end game of this. Get there and you'll kind of win it in the end. And they just covered details on how to do this and that and how should you do it. There's more pre-generated characters to tell this story with if you so wish. But we go into the last adventure of the book, and that's the Korra Era Adventure, Water and Mist. So, trouble is brewing in Republic City. First Gentleman, Varric, has been kidnapped and a conspiracy is afoot. For the last 2 decades, Wakanai, a Southern Water Tribe business magnate and inventor, has managed Republic City's water treatment plants on behalf of the city government. Yet it now appears that the Utilities Commission is poised to award the water management rights to San Ho, a mysterious Earth Kingdom businessman. President Julie Moon is sure San Ho has rigged the situation, and she strongly suspects he might even have something to do with Varric's recent disappearance. Can the heroes discover what Varric has to do with the dastardly plot and stop San Ho's machinations before it is too late? I think this is probably the overall best of the stories. I think this and the Roku Era story are definitely the best one, because this one actually involves Varric and giving you backstory with Varric to relate it to what goes on here. Whereas it feels like they were afraid to really do anything extra with Long Feng in some of the previous stories, use Rongi all that effectively in the first story, but they actually use Varric very heavily in this story. And there's a whole section that basically has full backstory for Varric, nearly. So I'll actually just read a lot of this. Summary. Sometime in the morning before the final match of the Spring Pro Bending Tournament qualifier, First Gentleman Varric took a break from the presidential box to stretch his legs. He never returned. His security searched the area but found no trace of the First Gentleman. Rather than alarm the citizenry, they took the matter to President Moon. Varric has been kidnapped by San Ho, a mysterious businessman in Republic City with a vendetta against Varric and Wakanai, a Southern Water Tribe business magnate and inventor. San Ho believes he was betrayed by Varric and Wakanai years ago, that they conspired to ruin him. He has built himself up ever since, becoming a newly powerful magnate with money to spend on his vendetta and the Terra Triad to carry out his will. He intends to use his criminal connections and wealth to destroy Wakanai's fortunes and end Varric all in one fell swoop. Wakanai's treatment centers are overseen by the Republic City Utilities Commissions, a panel of 3 bureaucrats who hold her and other public utility providers accountable for their work. San Ho's extraordinary wealth enabled him to throw lawyers at the Utility Commission until they agreed to review safety issues at the facilities. Wakanai's review is going poorly, and San Ho has bribed one of the 3 commissioners in charge of overseeing the water treatment rights, and this is how he's got that. Once he sabotages one of the older treatment centers, causing an explosion similar to the one that disgraced him all those years ago. And if Varric just happens to be in the building when that explosion happens, all the better. So that's how he plans to do it. Initially, the companions are sent by Julie Moon to find her husband, but through the investigation they discover San Ho's ploy, drawing them into a story of politics and intrigue. Saving Varric is only one small part of the issues the heroes could unravel here, and there are many directions their adventure could take. So, now we get into the backstory stuff. Past misdeeds. San Ho was not always known by that name. Decades ago, he was Yinuo, a fellow inventor and close friend of Wakanai. Yinuo and Yinuo... Oh wait, they spell it differently actually here. They initially say Y-I-N-U-O, and then they say Y-I-N-O-U. U-O... I think it's Uo? Yeah, I think Uo is the actual spelling. They just spell it wrong once there, I think. Yinuo. At first they were rivals and competing inventors, but as they learned from each other's work and their competition drove them to greater and greater heights of invention, soon enough they realized that they were stronger together than apart. Though they sometimes frustrated each other, their relationship developed into a partnership devoted to building new ways of helping the city and its people. Working together, they discovered a new method for desalinating the water around Republic City, potentially meeting the needs of the millions of people flocking to the bustling metropolis with an all-new water treatment facility. But Yinuo and Wakanai lacked the experience and funds to execute this idea at a massive scale and sell it to the city. Yinuo wanted to expand their operations without help, but Wakanai thought it was safer to turn to outside investors, like the young Icknick Blackstone Varric. The 2 inventors grew apart as they tried to find a path forward, each pursuing their own solutions and becoming increasingly distrustful of the other. Stunned by the potential of the technology, Varric was eager to invest. But when he learned that Wakanai's partner opposed his involvement, Varric also became eager to get rid of Yinuo. While Wakanai went looking for more investors, Varric tampered with one of Yinuo's experiments, causing an explosion to prove Yinuo's methods were dangerous. Varric seized the moment to present evidence that Yinuo's negligent experiments endangered everyone. Yinuo instantly recognized that the evidence was false, but Wakanai had already begun to mistrust Yinuo and refused to listen to him. The idea that they had become reckless fit only too well with the story she told herself. She believed Varric over her former partner. City regulators barred Yinuo from doing any further research and ordered him divested from the startup he had founded with Wakanai. Once Yinuo was out of the picture, Varric helped Wakanai negotiate a profitable arrangement with the city. Wakanai took on the responsibility for managing the treatment centers in exchange for generational rights to their profits. If Wakanai dies, the rights pass to her daughter Kiani rather than back to the city. Varric was proud to have negotiated the deal. He ensured Wakanai, a good Southern Water Tribe citizen, would be able to keep the business safely in their family. Wakanai has spent the last 20 years maintaining the treatment centers and working with the city government. Yinuo, unable to find work in the Republic City, was forced to return to the Earth Kingdom. He changed his name to San Ho and began working for the only people who would hire him after he was disgraced: criminals, warlords, and thieves. While Wakanai refused to gouge the city even in times of great needs, San Ho profited from the technology he sold to the highest bidder, no matter how they used it. So then they go into the backstory, like the commissioners and stuff like that. But just that alone is really interesting, in that, like, I suppose Varric was already wealthy at this time, but here is I suppose something else that he does that, you know, helps further improve, I suppose, his reputation as a high up from the Southern Water Tribe here. So, you know, that's pretty good. Like, it's more backstory than like 90% of what is presented in like the rest of the book. Like, there's the Roku era stuff, and then tiny other pieces of information, and then randomly Varric gets like this massive influx of information here. And again, it's because they actually utilize Varric in the story and flesh out a part of his character that we didn't know about. That's really, really good. What else do we have here? So yeah, we covered the idea of the three commissioners, and the idea is that one of them can be bribed, one of them can't be bribed, and one of them has more of a like personal dynamic in the situation, and stuff like that can happen. There's this interesting thing where they covered the idea that why aren't we involving the police in this? Why is it the companions that have to do this? This isn't the first time Varric has gone missing. Last year, he disappeared for nearly a month. He thought of a new use for a muso milk that was only going to work in the spirit world. The cost of the resulting search led Chief Beifong to institute the Varric rule in missing person cases. That particular idiot has to be missing for at least a week before anyone even talks to me about it. Despite his penchant for wanderlust, Varric really has been kidnapped by San Ho. So that's what's going on here. And yeah, the Terra Triad being properly reintroduced. This was the triad that I suppose a young Su Yin kind of got involved with, but they really haven't been of focus since I suppose the Triple Threats took over. So they're coming back with the help of this guy, which is kind of interesting. We cover some of the characters who are like the leaders. Wei Tia is the lieutenant in Republic City. There's also a guy named Steely Ning, who's also involved in the Terra Triad. What else do we got here? So yeah, Julie Moon's involved, Varric. Sholin is President Moon's executive secretary. Interestingly, Bo Lin is not mentioned in any of this, which, one, Bo Lin isn't a legend NPC right now. I'm guessing he will be one in the Republic City book whenever they get around to doing that. But right now, Bo Lin is not here, and he doesn't really get mentioned, I believe, in any of this, despite being friends with Varric and working for Zhu Li. So that feels like a little bit of a kind of missed opportunity there. But I get it, they probably don't want to involve such a powerful bender in this story, in that he could probably resolve it himself. So yeah, we covered the different characters here. Wakanai, her daughter Kiani, San Ho, of course, the Terra Triad, the kind of little bit of a dispute that's going on there. There's a Republic City journalist called Walal, W-A, like accent, A-H-L-A-A-L, who is a journalist, knows for a story. So she feels she has an obligation to the people of Republic City to present the truth. Lately, she has been investigating the whole morass around Wakanai, San Ho, and the Utilities Commission with some useful leads. There's Lin Li is the owner and operator of Everything But the Dragon in Dragon Flats, a curio shop and local fixture. And yeah, the Dragon Flats borough is also involved in this. The Terra Triad are basically kind of like taking money that is meant to be used to like redevelop the Dragon Flats for themselves. So there's some stuff going on there. Southern Water Tribe's cultural center, the offices of the Republic City News gets mentioned. Water treatment plant, Ba Mi Tang Dumplings headquarters, interesting. Warehouse 26 is an old building, City Hall, and yeah, again, there's pre-generated characters here, but this one is actually quite good because, like, look, extra information on Varric is always good. Terra Triad being reintroduced, a business plot that I think actually works and feels kind of interesting. I like that. So what I'd say about those 5 stories is that I think it feels like kind of 3 out of 5 of them work. quite well and seem very interesting, in that the Korra Era one feels good, the Aang Era one feels pretty good as well, the Roku Era one looks quite good. I'd just be a little bit let down by the Kyoshi Era one and the 100-Year War Era one, maybe feeling a little bit dull compared to them. But that is it. There is a chapter on like techniques, but they don't really describe the techniques all that much. It's just for the gameplay, and that is this book. So I'd say overall I was disappointed with the amount of Wan Shi Tong information, given that they said there would be Wan Shi Tong information. There is some, but it's nowhere near as much as I would have thought. Beyond that, like, I like that Taokaka gets a little bit more information on his Legend NPC page, and hopefully for other characters as they get Legend NPCs, I guess in future books we'll learn more about them. But other than that, the main thing is just kind of scavenging what information you can from the adventure guides. And the stuff with Varric is quite good, and it's up to you about how much you really want to read into the adventures, because I know myself, like, it's a lot of information to go through, and that, like, there's like 20-ish pages or so on like each of those adventures, and most of it is about how to play it from like a GM running the campaign perspective, and it's hard to know like what's the important information, what isn't important, just because, you know, will we ever come back to any of this stuff? It's nice to have it, because if they ever do get to new content that references it, like new comics mentioning the Sparrowkeet Air Company, like, cool, we know what it is, we have a little bit of foundation. But it feels like the sort of information that requires more stuff to come that references this stuff. On its own, a lot of the adventure guide information, the adventure book information, just feels like we'll put that over away to the side for now and just wait and see what happens with it. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the Wan Shi Tong Adventure Guide. What are your thoughts on the new art that we got for main characters in their comic design in a new look for the first time, the little bit of Wan Shi Tong information we do get, and any extra stuff that we learn about from the adventure books. What are your thoughts? But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.